Order. So 9:01, we have a quorum. I expect we might have one or two other members join us. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. It has been posted. We have the minutes. Come on in. We have the minutes from months ago, actually July 26th. Are there any comments, any corrections, additions, deletions you'd like to make? Okay, without objection, then the minutes are approved. Before I ask for citizen comments, we have a few new faces around the room that I want to make sure that everybody knows who's in the room. So why don't we just kind of start at this end and go around? Grant, you're going to be our speaker, one of our speakers, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Grant McClure with the Coastal Conservation League.
Kurt Freeze, the development director of the city.
Stephen Anderson with BJWSA.
Taylor Ladd, BJWSA.
I'm Mike Gardy. I'm with LATS.
Good morning, Joe Mack, Beaufort Trailblazers.
I'm Kate Schaefer with the Open Land Trust. Mayor Ryan Krieger, I am with the Air Station.
I'm Dana Bauer, I'm the coordinator for the South Carolina Low Country Sentinel Landscape.
Bill Grubbs, Town of Port Royal Planning.
Good morning, Scott Marshall, City of Beaufort City Manager.
Van Willis, Town of Port Royal.
Rob Merchant, director of planning and zoning for Beaufort County.
Mike Tomey, City of Beaufort.
Jerry Ashmore, Town of Port Royal.
Wendy Zara.
Bill Colewood, City of Beaufort.
Earl Campbell School Board.
Mike McPhee, City of Beaufort.
Mitch Mitchell, Thompson, City of Beaufort.
Ed Pappas, Beaufort County Planning Commission. All right, well, thank you. Are there any citizen comments that we need to entertain before we get into our agenda? This is the moment that we have open for that. Okay, hearing none then, let's go right into our agenda for the day. We have two speakers. First speaker is Dana Bauer. Dana is the project coordinator for the Open Land Trust and the Department of Defense interface on the Sentinel Landscape Partnership. And she's here to tell us what's going on and what's coming up. Thank you, Dana, for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all this morning. So again, my name is Dana Bauer. I'm the coordinator for the South Carolina Low Country Sentinel Landscape. And I'm going to kind of explain what a sentinel landscape is, what this means for the low country, and kind of what this means moving forward. You want to go to the next slide? Okay, so what is a sentinel landscape? So formally, the Sentinel Landscape Partnership Program is a partnership between the Department of Defense, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Interior. And so they really came together to recognize these areas where conservation, working lands, and national defense interests converge and overlap, because there's a lot of shared priorities and goals. When you look at the three departments, it may not immediately come to mind that DoD and Fish and Wildlife Service, for example, have a lot in common, but they really truly do. And so Sentinel Landscape, this was really an effort spearheaded by DoD, working with the other two departments, and all of the Sentinel landscapes are anchored by at least one high-value military installation, training range, testing range, but they all contain high-priority lands for all three departments. And so I think, when you look at the mission for the Sentinel Landscape Partnership, you can really see kind of the overlap that all three departments, have shared priorities when you look at advancing sustainable land management. You look at strengthening military readiness and supporting our national defense and national security, preserving natural resources, including those at risk and protected species, supporting agricultural productivity and keeping, working farms working, increasing access to outdoor recreation, and of course, enhancing resilience to climate change. Next slide. So why is this important? First and foremost, again, because DoD really kind of paved the way for this partnership program, and because it's sort of a shared collective goal is to really enhance the military's ability to carry out its mission, to carry out the testing, training, operational activities that they need to do to, support our nation's warfighter. But also through this partnership program, there's additional visibility and resources available through the program, including support from the Federal Coordinating Committee, which has leadership representation from all three of those departments. Third bullet there, a big piece of this is access to funding. So you can see through just FY22, projects across all of the Sentinel landscapes have attracted about $335 million in USDA funding, $233 million from DoD, and $92 million from Interior, in addition to leveraging state, local, and private funding. It's a huge opportunity that opens a lot of doors. And so another piece of that is with DoD's REPI program, so their Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program. And if you're not already familiar with it, Beaufort County has been a longstanding partner with the REPI program. I think it was actually one of the first, if not the first, Marine Corps REPI program here for Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort. And what's kind of notable about the REPI program is the way the statutory authority works for establishing the REPI program. Funding made through the REPI program can then serve as a non-federal match to a number of other federal programs, which is a huge capability. It's also huge from enhanced collaboration opportunity when you're looking at different agencies, different stakeholders across the landscape. It really kind of paves the way for that more of that landscape scale planning and implementation effort. Next slide. And so I think this is a very busy graphic, but I think it's helpful just from a visual standpoint to really see kind of in the white circle part, you can see kind of those core values that are really shared across these three departments. And each one, kind of has their own focus areas. You see DoD programs kind of to the north, southeast is Department of Ag, and then to the southwest is Interior. And there's obviously different agencies and programs within those departments. A lot of these are essentially funding grant programs. And I think it's just helpful to see kind of the interrelatedness. And again, through the Sentinel Landscape Partnership Program, a lot of access to these different funding sources and ability to match funding sources is opened up through this partnership. Next slide. So where are the Sentinel landscapes? So again, just for some context, there are now 18 Sentinel landscapes. They just designated 5 more at the beginning of this year, and it's on a 2-year cycle essentially, so there won't be any more designated for another 2 years. But I think it's really helpful to see, when we're looking at the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast region, you can see obviously we share on the other side of the Savannah River, we have our sister Sentinel landscape, the Georgia Sentinel landscape. And when we talk about some of the, when we look at longleaf pine habitat, we obviously have shared goals with Eastern North Carolina, Georgia, Northwest Florida, looking at coastal and climate resilience issues. We have a lot of shared goals with some of these other Sentinel landscapes. And so another piece of this partnership program is being able to kind of work together and kind of leverage the resources that we all have kind of individually as landscapes and to kind of do more things on a multi-state landscape level scale. Next slide. All right, so low country Sentinel landscape, what does this mean? So it was officially designated last year. It became the 11th Sentinel landscape in the country. And I know a number of you all were involved in this effort, and a big part of this effort was from these 2 ladies sitting here in the room who really spearheaded that, kind of monumental effort to get that across the finish line through the designation application process. But we are officially a Sentinel landscape now. The landscape, and I have a map on the next slide, but the landscape is over 2.2 million acres. Of course, our anchor military installations are Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, Marine Corps Recruit Depot Paris Island, and then the Naval Hospital. And it was really recognized for a lot of the things that we already know. I mean, the Low Country is a huge place of importance from a biodiversity standpoint. When you look at longleaf pine habitat, salt marsh, the working farms and forests that we have, wildlife corridors, both existing wildlife corridors and then the pretty significant potential that we have for additional kind of unbroken wildlife corridors that provide that connectivity. It's really, really significant. Next slide, we'll go to the map. So this is the map. You can see outlined in yellow here is the boundary of the Low Country Sentinel landscape. So it's all of Beaufort, Jasper, Hampton, and Colleton, and then portions of kind of 5 along the northern and eastern border, and essentially runs from the Savannah River over to the Edisto. And you can see in purple the special use airspace that's owned and managed by Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort, and then the military flight training routes are in gray, including obviously the routes that they use to go down to Georgia to Townsend Bombing Range. And then protected lands are in green, and I think it also speaks to the options again for connectivity when you look at Savannah River, the protected lands along Savannah River, which is vital from a water quality standpoint. Also in the Ace Basin area, and just the opportunities to provide some connectivity between those, which kind of overlap with the military airspace as well. Because really, I think about 3/4 of our Sentinel landscape has this military mission footprint when you look at airspace and the actual installation footprints and training areas. So this is our landscape. Next slide. And so when we look at, again, why this area was really recognized as so significant and what eventually led to the successful designation as a Sentinel landscape, 58% of the land within the landscape boundary is recognized at a national level for its significance from a conservation priority standpoint. Mentioned the western boundary of the Savannah River, that's where we get our drinking water from. Over 500,000 residents between the 2 states, but it's also where the military installations get their drinking water from. So when you look at water security and water availability, that's definitely, a shared goal when you look between the military and the community. And also, of course, we have to talk about salt marsh. So 55% of South Carolina's salt marsh is found within the boundaries of the Sentinel landscape. And South Carolina is home to 1/3 of all of the South Atlantic salt marsh. So it's a very significant amount of salt marsh that's very obviously important from a coastal resilience standpoint. And so we'll talk about that more when we get into the goals. But next slide. And just quickly, again, some context when we look at the Southeast region on where the other Sentinel landscapes are in the Southeast, and just the opportunities to kind of work together, either collaboratively on different projects and also to kind of share best practices and lessons learned, because we do have a lot of shared overlap. But again, we share a border with Georgia Sentinel landscape, and I know Northeast Florida Sentinel landscape has been working on getting designated, so that would provide, again, some additional connectivity in the Jacksonville area. Next slide. And so when we look at the threats through a military community lens, when we look at encroachment challenges, a lot of them are really shared between our military partners and the community. So when you talk about incompatible development, obviously this is a rapidly growing area that is experiencing pretty immense growth and development. Our neighbor Jasper County is the fastest growing county in South Carolina. And so, when we look at areas where there are overlap with military training, when we look at low level flying airspace that, the air station needs, you really want kind of a pristine training environment under that airspace. So you want lower density uses, you want lower heights. And so recognizing that those are generally in areas where that's advantageous to the community as well, is identifying those areas to protect against incompatible development, keep working farms and forests working from a light pollution standpoint and exposure to noise in the community. You want to keep those areas, less densely used. And similarly, when we look at land conversion from those working farms and forests into more dense uses, the loss of habitat for at-risk and protected species, that can have ramifications on what the military partners can do on the installation and in their training areas. Inability for those rural properties as they get converted to be able to do kind of what they need to do naturally when we look at prescribed burns, having restrictions if that's in your populated areas. We've talked about the threats to drinking water. Climate change, of course, when we look at increased frequency of large rain events, extreme weather events, when we look at storm surge and sea level rise, those all have threats both to military and community infrastructure. Next slide. And so this is really the magic of the Sentinel Landscape Partnership Program. Again, it is a partnership program. And so, our partnership program has over 30 partners across federal, state, local, private, and nonprofit levels. We also have our steering committee, which a number of the partners listed here are part of, and we are also in the process of standing up working groups in alignment with our Sentinel Landscape goals, which are on the next slide if you want to go to that. And so through the application process to be designated a Sentinel Landscape, the steering committee really worked together to identify what the key goals for our Low Country Sentinel Landscape are. And so those are listed here. Reducing vulnerabilities to climate change by promoting nature-based solutions, protecting and enhancing ecologically significant areas to support those imperiled species, protecting source water quality, supporting and protecting working farms and forests. And then the fifth one is really sort of a catch-all communications-oriented goal to really establish and promote the Sentinel Landscape Partnership here in the Low Country. Next slide. And so this is just sort of a representation. You see those 5 goals on the left and some examples of some of the strategies and actions that have been identified to kind of advance towards those goals. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about some of our ongoing projects that our partners are working towards. Next slide. So this is kind of a roll-up of key actions since March 2023. So it was designated a Sentinel Landscape in March of last year. When we look at land conservation, just within our Low Country Sentinel Landscape boundary, over 22,000 acres have been permanently protected, and a significant project of that is one I'm going to talk a little bit about, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Through one of our partners, the South Low Country ACE Basin, so Low ACE Longleaf Partnership, they've been conducting prescribed fire burns and also doing longleaf pine reforestation work. We have a number of different coastal resilience projects that are ongoing that I'll talk about. And then I also want to talk about our Nature Conservancy. One of our partners worked with Beaufort Conservation District to do a Beaufort County needs assessment, specifically working with small farmers. Next slide. So Gregory Neck. This is really kind of becoming the keystone project that just timing-wise sort of, I think, kicked off the Low Country Sentinel Landscape Partnership. And so if you're not familiar with it, and I'm sure Kate can jump in, I don't want to steal any of her thunder either. She played a huge role in this, of course. But so this is a 4,400 acre property, really at the mouth of the Port Royal Sound in Jasper County. And so it went on the market. The Nature Conservancy really took a leap of faith in submitting an offer and was successful in being able to purchase the property with the intent that they would be working with partners and funders to get it permanently protected through a conservation easement and then to sort of break it out into a handful of tracts for conservation-minded buyers who have a vested interest in owning that type of property. And that's essentially what happened. And it happened through funding from the DoD REPI program because, of course, Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort had a vested interest in this, both from an airspace perspective of preventing that from becoming developed into dense residential development underneath their airspace, as well as from a water quality protection standpoint. So again, its location at the mouth of the Port Royal Sound and the threats that would have presented to water quality were that developed. It also used $2 million from the South Carolina Conservation Bank. Beaufort County Green Space Program contributed $1 million, and then the Nature Conservancy themselves donated $4.5 million towards the conservation easement, which the Open Land Trust was then able to purchase, and it is now permanently protected. And I think it's really notable just because, one, it was the first Beaufort County Green Space project, but maybe also more importantly, it's really the first known example in South Carolina of a county approving funding to support land conservation in an adjacent county. And I think that just really speaks to the importance of that particular property and the importance of protecting the Port Royal Sound from a water quality standpoint. We're all getting our water from that source, and just the formal acknowledgement of the significance of that. And so when we look at, the Broad River corridor and the Port Royal Sound, there's huge opportunities from a land conservation standpoint just to provide that habitat connectivity, wildlife corridors with those protected lands, but also to support the water quality. Next slide. So we have a number of ongoing living shoreline projects that our partners are working towards. So first that I want to highlight is the Nature Conservancy received funding from NOAA's Transformational Habitat and Coastal Resilience Fund, and a part of that overall project that they're doing is this Oyster Castle Reef construction project at Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort's Laurel Bay housing area to address some erosion issues. So that's what that photo in the upper left corner is, and so that will be 2,000 linear feet of Oyster Castle Reef. I forget where they are currently, but that is the end goal. I think they have 400 or 500 feet completed right now. It's a good workout if you want to participate in future build events. I encourage it, but be prepared. Secondly is Coastal Conservation League is the lead for this project that received funding from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's National Coastal Resilience Fund, which I just want to kind of foot stomp that point. DoD REPI program provides funding to the National Coastal Resilience Fund, so that's sort of they have a set aside special earmarked funding pot for projects that support military installations. So they're doing 3.1 acres of restored marsh footprint using manufactured wire reefs with oyster shells inside and placing those on points on Beaufort River, Battery Creek, and Archers Creek that are kind of adjacent to Paris Island or near Paris Island that will kind of support some marsh loss, erosion, and storm surge benefits for Paris Island. And then the third one I want to highlight is a project that's being led by the Legacy Works Group. They received funding from NIFWIF America the Beautiful Fund, which, again, part of the America the Beautiful funding source is that they have a set aside for sentinel landscapes, so projects within a sentinel landscape. So they are working to build capacity to conserve salt marsh habitat within the South Atlantic Salt Marsh Initiative, SASMI, SASMI's geography, which is North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And so the Low Country is a part of that overall, multi-state effort. And so they are working to kind of stand up a community of practice to work together and identify a list of basically 25 nature-based solution type projects. And a handful of that will end up being projects that kind of move forward in the Low Country, moving forward into the permitting and design phases. Next slide. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with the Military Installation Resilience Review, MER, or MIR, I call it. So LCOG received funding from DoD's Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation, old CC, to conduct the initial MIR, which was essentially a very robust threats and vulnerability analysis from a resilience lens, looking at kind of the shared infrastructure and vulnerabilities to the military as well as the community. That report was completed in 2022, and kind of the key takeaway of that is that it identified 3 pilot projects as part of that effort. And so this first pilot project that is moving forward with additional funding from old CC is the Shell Point project. So the Shell Point 21 interchange, so essentially the ramp going off of 21 and onto the causeway to Paris Island, which of course is the only way on and off the installation. That is moving to a scoping phase and then a partial design to 60% design. That's going to do a number of efforts: shoreline stabilization, flood management, water quality, habitat restoration. You can see some of, hard to see, but addressing erosion, marsh loss, pluvial flooding, coastal flooding, storm surge. And so I think in the next couple of weeks, the consultant team that is leading that effort, they're actually going to be holding a stakeholder tabletop exercise. So looking forward to that. Next slide. And so this project, this is an exciting one also. So Beaufort Conservation District received funding from the Nature Conservancy to support a field agent, Mr. Walter Mack, if you're familiar. And so he did this initial kind of baseline assessment for kind of addressing a gap of this lack of knowledge and understanding of where Beaufort County small farmers are, who are they, like what are their needs, and also specifically targeting Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC small farmers. So he ended up doing outreach and visits with 25 small farmers, and you can kind of see the map. Obviously a lot are concentrated on St. Helena, with a couple south of the Broad River and some others spread out kind of in the Burton area. And so this was really, again, a baseline assessment to understand, who these small farmers are, what are their farming operations, the scale of those farming operations, what are the challenges, are they aware of, and taking advantage of some of those funding incentives through USDA programs, whether they were signed up for the ag tax relief, and again, understanding what their needs were from an equipment standpoint, from a technical assistance standpoint, what did they need? And so kind of the next steps of this project are one, working with some of our neighboring counties, the soil and water conservation districts, to expand this project and basically replicate this needs assessment project in other counties. And then also within Beaufort County to kind of advance into the next steps, addressing some of the needs that came out of that, which is technical assistance for getting enrolled with the Farm Service Agency and other USDA programs. If they're eligible for ag tax relief, supporting that process. Trying to stand up a farm tool share program to address some of the equipment needs for some of these smaller farmers, improving regional distribution of farm goods, and then seeking funding for some of those infrastructure, like addressing cold storage, storage sheds, all of those to kind of support regional food distribution. So excited for that project as well. Next slide. And so I've talked a lot throughout this kind of about the different funding partners, and there are a lot, and I feel like, you know, we, as our partners are applying for additional funding, this is sort of a list that's growing, it seems like every day, but I think it speaks to just the many layers when you look at federal, state, local, private funding sources. And so, and of course, Beaufort County being a big piece of that with their green space program, rural and critical lands historically as well. So looking forward to the additional opportunities that come out of this. Next slide. That's it. So I have my contact information here. Have our snazzy QR code that will take you to, there is an official Sentinel Landscapes partnership page, and the Low Country Sentinel Landscape has a web page within that site, so that will take you there. But yeah, happy to answer any questions that anyone has, and thank you again for the opportunity to talk to you this morning.
By definition, do you know what small farms, do they have an acreage requirement or cutoff or?
I want to say, I think it was loosely defined in this effort, but I want to say it sort of mirrored the USDA $1,000 a year of farm income.
Just
I believe. I don't think it was in acreage.
Other questions? I have a question. You mentioned a steering committee overseeing the project movements. What is the composition of it? Does it include elected officials? Does it include municipal officials?
So it has representation from the military installations as well as some of the state, federal and state agencies. And then Stephanie Rossi, LCOG, is a member, not elected officials on the steering committee.
Okay. All right, I think we can get a copy of your address and we'll send them out to the members. All right, other questions? Kate, did you want to add anything?
Sure. I mean, I hope you all are impressed. Dana's been on the team since May, and I think has really synthesized well the intersectionality of all of the work. If you're wondering, like, why does this matter to me as a City of Beaufort person or a Port Royal planner, I mean, inherently the work that you all are doing by developing a well inside an urban growth boundary, thinking about ACUs, thinking about how all these agencies interact in the northern region of Beaufort County, is supporting the coordination that's taking place from the military, the conservation, the resilience partners. And so I hope you walk away from this presentation feeling really in sync with a lot of things that are happening, and the power of that being able to attract more funding so that we can continue to do more good stuff faster and more frequently and again and again and again. And that's the goal, because we're going to build a healthy community both for our citizens who live here and for our military partners and for our conservation resources. And it's only all possible through efforts like this. So just a huge thank you to Dana for being here, for leading it, for synthesizing all this information, for being a resource to you all. And you know, if you can start to feel how the puzzle pieces go together, we welcome continued conversations from this group.
Mary, did you want anything?
No, I think they covered it.
Oh, again, thank you very much, Dana, for your
Thank you.
presentation. Very informative. Lots of things going on.
Yes.
Okay, Greg McClure is with us and is going to speak, giving us an update on the county's plastic bag ordinance and the other interesting things going on right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very much for having me today. My name is Grant McClure with the Coastal Conservation League. A little bit about the League. We are a 501c3 environmental advocacy organization, and we're headquartered in Charleston, but we've got two folks working here in Beaufort. And so it's myself and then the office director, Jesse White. I grew up in Charleston, but my whole family's now down in Beaufort. So you may see them around. I know my dad's been at the HRB in the city of Beaufort quite a bit lately. He's an architect. My sister is a vet. She lives out on Ladies Island. And then my other sister is a school teacher at Riverview. So I live with my wife in the Pigeon Point area. She teaches at Bridges and USCB. So we're all here. So there's a good chance I'll run into y'all outside of this meeting today. And Yeah, just a little bit about my background. I went to Wofford College in Spartanburg, and they did win their first football game yesterday by 1 point. So go Terriers! And I also have a master's from Clemson. So looking forward to the big game Saturday. But yeah, I'd like to talk to you all today about plastic bag ordinances, what some of the other municipalities and counties in our Low Country region are doing, and how we can strengthen ours so that we're up to task with some of these other jurisdictions. So, this was a slide that I stole from Ricky Parker, who worked at the Conservation League previously and earned the nickname Bag Lady whenever the first ban went into effect in 2018. But it just goes to show that the elephant in the room is that we have a plastic pollution problem with as much as 30,000 elephants, I assume in weight, entering the ocean each year. Okay, so a little bit about the history of this ordinance in Beaufort County. They first kind of started discussing the idea back in 2017. And at that point, the county decided that workshops would be beneficial to get some public feedback, engage support. And then also it was decided that basically the municipalities and the county need to be on the same page with bringing forward any kind of plastic bag ban. And so in 2018, everybody agreed that we were going to ban plastic bags. And so we were successful in passing that despite opposition from folks from the plastic industry and some of these larger big box stores lobbying against it. So this was really a huge accomplishment to get that first bag ban put into place. You may recall the State House at the time was talking about a ban on bans, essentially taking away home rule. We were successful in fighting that off as well. But unfortunately, as kind of a byproduct, what we saw was that those thicker plastic bags started popping up. And I think that was, a lot of people weren't necessarily expecting those to start showing up. And they market those as multi-use. So not single use, but we can use this several times. This is thicker plastic. So that's kind of how some of these grocery stores got around making the switch to paper. Additionally, we had a pandemic in 2020. And so that kind of led to, I think, for very reasonable cause, led to very relaxed enforcement and a lot of folks ordering things like takeout. And so important that we were able to have those for that purpose during that time. So where are we now is that now that we're post-pandemic, a lot of the municipalities and counties across our state are, at least on the coast, are updating their ordinances to close the loophole that allows for those thicker plastic bags. Beaufort County had proposed the Keep Beaufort County Beautiful board actually had proposed some language. It did meet some opposition at the county council level, but we've taken some of that feedback. We're currently working with Beaufort County staff, as well as the Port Royal Sound Foundation and others, on proposing some new language. And, in addition to addressing the plastic bag loophole, we want to start having conversations about regulating those foam clamshells, as well as plastic carryout cutlery. We've talked about straws as well. And so we're still working on this language. It is in process, but we're communicating with the city of Charleston on this, who is kind of at the forefront of a lot of these ordinances. So why should we regulate these items, plastics and foam? Well, we know that they're ending up in our ecosystems and can be harmful for marine health. We also know that these larger items can actually break down into smaller particles, which can not only be harmful for animals as they ingest those small microplastics and it magnifies up the food chain, but it can also have repercussions for our own health as we're consuming things like fish that are ingesting these microplastics. We also know that supporting paper products and more sustainable products can actually be beneficial for the forestry industry, and there are are businesses in South Carolina that are already manufacturing compostable ware, things like bamboo cutlery, and so we can support those smaller businesses as well through this. Yeah, and I think we've all seen some of these horror story photos. I for whatever reason, the like turtle photos are especially jarring to me, so I spared you a gory turtle photo. But yeah, it's a shame to see images like this. We can go on to the next slide. Okay, well, additionally, I truly believe that a lot of businesses in Beaufort County and surrounding areas are probably already doing the right thing. I know like Food Lion uses paper, Publix uses paper. There's just a handful of outliers that aren't providing better options to consumers. And I believe that you know, folks will actually frequent those businesses that are doing the right thing. I think we've got a strong environmental ethic in our community here in Beaufort, and people want things that are green and things that are sustainable. These large corporations like, let's say, Google, have these sustainability goals they strive to reach. And so being good on the environment isn't inherently anti-business. And additionally, it's just time to catch up to speed. So you see here some of the other places that have gone in and updated their plastic ordinances to also include things like foam and straws and close that loophole for the thick bags. So City of Charleston recently updated their ordinance, as well as the town of Mount Pleasant, James Island, and Folly Beach have all gone in and updated their ordinances within the past year. A little bit of data to support updating the plastic ordinance. This is just a small data point, but in 2023, the aquarium found 875 plastic retail bags in the Charleston Harbor, on the Charleston Peninsula, and a lot of them were those thicker reusable bags. And there was also a study done by some College of Charleston and Citadel students that actually found that there was a 50% decrease in then single-use plastic bags after that initial plastic bag ban went into place. But then as a result of that initial ban, there was a 200% increase in those thick bags showing up. So it showed that that first ban was effective. However, as a byproduct, we got this 200% increase in thick bags. And then just additionally, today we know 1,600 species have been reported to ingest plastic, and 1,300 of those have been ocean dwellers. So this graphic gives you an idea of where there are statewide bag laws, as well as states that have home rule. So here in South Carolina, we're light blue. It's kind of hard to tell, but that means that basically counties, municipalities have the ability to still adopt bag bans and have plastic ordinances. The darker blue states, those are statewide bag bans in those states, so no plastic bags across the entire state. And then the red states is state preemption. So those were states that were successful in passing a ban on plastic bag bans. And so, yeah, you can see that across our coast, it's especially the East Coast, it's fairly common. So consumers have adapted to this, you know, having these regulations in place. We have a lot of folks that visit from up north, and they've got a similar ban up there, and so it's not super unusual for them to come down to South Carolina, and with the exception of seeing those thicker plastic bags. Okay, so these are just a couple of small data points that I wanted to share for some recent litter sweeps to give you a sense of just how much trash is actually showing up during some of these litter sweeps that are going on. This was Caligny Beach, one of the heavier trafficked beaches on Hilton Head Island. Back in June, there was a Sea Turtle Auxiliary group that found 48 straws and a bunch of plastic beach toys, 46.5 pounds of trash. We can go on. And then this data I think is especially relevant because this litter sweep was done literally right outside of this building along Boundary Street in July in partnership with the Conservation League and Port Royal Sound Foundation. We found 6 balloons, 10 plastic carry-out cutlery items, 22 plastic straws, 28 thick plastic bags, and 44 thin plastic bags, as well as 68 of those plastic takeaway items, including lids, cups, and containers, 184 plastic bottles, and 234 pieces of styrofoam that were our measurement was bigger than the hand. There's so many little pieces that we didn't even bother counting those. And so these items are showing up just right at our doorstep and are pretty prolific. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that a lot of places are starting to think about these problems and make an effort to solve them through updating their ordinances. So the City of Charleston, James Island, Mount Pleasant, and Folly Beach have all gone in and closed the loophole that allows for the plastic bags. This gives you a picture of kind of what is banned where. And so you'll notice that under the disposable cutlery category, several of the municipalities have elected to make it available on request. And essentially what that means is that, when you order takeout, that you might eat with your own silverware at home, you're not automatically going to have just plastic cutlery thrown in there that ends up in your junk drawer for years at a time. And so when you get on like your DoorDash app, it'll ask you if you want cutlery, yes or no. In Charleston, we got some feedback that a lot of businesses actually support this policy because it's a cost savings for them. The customers don't get it unless they want it, and so they're going through less product. So this is just another way. And actually, I heard recently from Port Royal Sound Foundation, there was a study that showed that on request can be as much as a 70% reduction in the amount of single-use plastic that's circulating. So just if there is anxiety about not wanting an outright ban on these items, that is a way to sort of provide some flexibility. You'll also notice that it's kind of interesting, just 2 of the beach communities, Folly and Isle of Palms, both have balloon bans. And interestingly, the entire state of Florida, this last legislative session passed a ban on balloon releases, 10 balloons or more. I think 9 is still a lot of balloons personally to release, but just something else to think about. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, we're working on proposing new language with the county, and we'd like the municipalities to be a part of that as well. And we're kind of prioritizing which items we want to ban. And I think right now we're thinking we want to close that loophole for the thick plastic bags. We are talking about doing away with the foam clamshell containers and also making carry-out cutlery on request. So I think those are the 3 that we've kind of identified. And we're going to be working on proposing new language with Rob and Beaufort County staff. And we'd like, I think for this to be successful, it's important that everybody, like in 2018, everybody is on the same page. Additionally, we're continuing to have conversations with business owners because we acknowledge that there is some cost to this, but there is also a cost to doing nothing, and that's how these items end up in our environment. And so if there's ways that we can talk to businesses and try to mitigate some of their concerns, we're having those conversations. I'm meeting with, I hope to meet with the Beaufort Area Hospitality Association for a second time this week, or next week. And also I talked to Surge Group, which is one of the larger groups on Hilton Head. And so they're aware that these changes are in the works, and we're in communication to try to find out how we can reconcile some of their concerns as we work on proposing new language. Okay, so if this is an issue that you're interested in spearheading, I think it's important to talk to your friends and family about it. if y'all are interested in tackling this, figuring out who could be a champion, maybe there are Adopt a Highway or litter patrol groups in your area that are already collecting a lot of litter but aren't necessarily logging it. I think that's an important thing to collect that data. It's going to be really important to support any changes. Additionally, letters to the editor are helpful as well. Okay, so a couple of questions for consideration. I mentioned earlier that some items are available on request. Are there certain items that y'all feel like are betterment, like maybe straws or carry-out cutlery could be available on request? Additionally, there is the city of Charleston did actually like a transition period. They got a grant from DHEC, which allowed for I think it essentially gave some funding to businesses to purchase some of these more sustainable products. But it also included, they also did like a grace period where if you had literally just stocked up on, like, let's say foam clamshells, you were able to use up that supply before, enforcement. Additionally, I think enforcement is an important question. I think a lot of this, especially with like having items available on request, really falls on citizens to report. And so having like a tool for citizens to report, I think is going to be key. And so we've talked about maybe there's a way to do like a hardship exemption for a small business if they can prove that this is going to be really difficult for them to continue operating. And additionally, I think I hit on everything there. So. Okay, and similar to the slide we looked at earlier, during Dana's presentation, there are a lot of folks doing this conservation work. We all work together, and so we want to be a resource, and so just wanted to offer that support as we're working through these changes. And additionally, I wanted to invite anyone in this room to join us for a litter sweep on October 10th at Whitehall Park on Ladies Island. So be curious to see what we find at Whitehall, and we'd be happy to have y'all there. So it's going to be from 5:30 to 7:30. That is actually with the Beaufort Litter Patrol group, which does a lot of work in Port Royal. It's a younger group and pretty fun to get out with them. So looking forward to that and happy to answer questions.
Questions?
You answered mine on the grace period. I use them as follows.
Brad, you
Yes.
mentioned an agreed upon definition after going to the council committee. What is that definition?
Well, so I think probably the easiest way are you referring to like the definition for the plastic bags? I think there's a certain mill, so it's like four mils. That's like the thickness. Addressing that, I think there's a way to word it so it's like, bags more than 4 mils, and then I don't know the exact language, but it's similar to that where it's dealing with the thickness, and then the handles. So it doesn't allow, and Rob may know, but the handles are the other.
Some special language that addresses the way the handle is made.
Yeah.
That covers.
Yeah, so the thickness and the handles are defined in a way that precludes the thicker bags.
The big box stores figured out the last definition pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'd like to add, we reached out to the city of Charleston because we were really curious. They have one of the more stringent ordinances. And found out several interesting things. They did a lot of upfront work before they ruled out their ordinance. One of it, included proactively reaching out to businesses, retailers, but also they did a survey. And I was kind of, basically their takeaway, and this is just, from speaking to their staff person who's involved in this, is that the larger the franchises, they're used to adjusting to this in other areas of the country that already have restrictions on plastic uses. So they're, they may, complain, but they have the resources and they have also the precedent in other communities to do this. So that's not much of an issue. The other thing that they found out, which I thought was interesting, is there were a lot of small businesses that wanted to do the right thing. So we keep looking at this as the government stepping in and saying you can't do something, but I think a lot of small businesses were excited about being, because we're a very conservation-minded community, and that they've seen cost savings. I think you had mentioned a reduction. If you're not giving out straws with every drink, you're reducing the cost of cutlery, straws. So there's a positive thing. The other thing is that I think as Grant mentioned, they got grant money to, kind of be proactive with businesses, introducing a more, a clamshell that is biodegradable and things like that. So it was really helpful to reach out to them because the same businesses that we have are over there, the franchise, the fast food places. So it's not like we're paving new territory.
Grant, you mentioned, the upon request, and that intrigues me. You can go shop at a Publix just in Argent Boulevard, just on the other side in Jasper County. And they'll give you plastic bags. They've gotten to a point now where do you want plastic or paper, and I see a lot of the people picking plastic. So I kind of wonder, upon request is going to have to be accompanied by an citizen educational program, a significant one, on the severity of the downside of plastics. Whether it's in the food you consume or potentially in drinking water. Without that, this upon request, I don't know how it can be of real value.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the education piece, continuing that even after any kind of ordinance update is key. So I think absolutely continuing to educate is always important.
Other questions?
Have you looked at the cost of cleanup? I mean, when you have to deal with plastic and all that, and you having to collect it, get rid of it, all that, has that been factored in? And you got some numbers? Because I think that makes a difference too if you're going to sell this to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And it costs people's time to go out there and pick it up. And I know one big issue is that getting plastic bags getting down storm drains. So all of that has a cost. I don't have those numbers, but there may be something out there.
About recycling programs through the area that would actually be more of a catalyst for encouraging people to proper placement, as far as disposal.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I know the county just entered a new contract with IT Recycling, and I don't know if they accept plastic bags or not. Are you referring to some of the other items?
All of them, like plastic bottles and, things that do have recyclability as far as they're touted as being recyclable, at least. So.
Yeah, I guess, again, the education piece of it is still important. Even if we do make these changes, we have to continue to hammer home. I think a lot of people, I know I2 has some very specific requirements. I think you can't have items smaller than a cup. They also ask that you take off all your caps. And I'm sure that a lot of people might not be aware of those rules. And so.
Because I don't think that doesn't exist with us. We're not required to remove caps on our recycling.
No, not in the city.
Yeah, so everywhere's different. So it's
The county.
it can be confusing for sure as a individual trying to recycle. Yes.
I know a guy up in Alaska that owns over 2,000 acres and has well over 200 employees. And they have ATVs and everything up there that they use. And he takes plastic and turns it into fuel, turns it into gasoline. And he operates all of his equipment from that. I don't know if you know anything about that or if that just seems like a great idea. I don't know how cost effective it may or may not be, but sounds like something that nobody else is even thinking about.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that industry, but it makes sense since the plastic is kind of made from a fuel source to convert it back to a fuel source. But one thing I will say, I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that, which is a composting facility, which is something that we don't have in Beaufort County, but the city of Charleston does have an industrial composting facility. And so I know that there's been talks about that, like a sustainability campus in Beaufort County that might include some composting, but that's still a work in progress, and I think a noble goal to try to get one here.
If you want, I'll try and get you this contact information for this guy, but they developed this equipment with the university up there, and I know he's been doing it for many years now, so it just seems like it is something, if he's learned how to do it and it's anywhere near cost effective, ought to be implemented.
Grant, I would just encourage you to continue, to the effort, because I think we've all gone to Costco. They don't give you anything to put your bag of stuff in, right? No one stops going to Costco. And I think it's kind of probably like a huge ship. It's going to take a while to turn this. But I was always curious about the plastic bag thing, because I thought we had gotten rid of the plastic bags, and then I noticed if you go to a store like Walmart and you get even stronger plastic bag. I was curious about
Piggly
that.
Wiggly.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. But you go to Lowe's and they have paper. And you buy one thing, but you got this huge bag. Sometimes they'll just keep the bag and walk out the store with the receipt. But I think it can happen, but it's going to take a while to turn the ship.
Costco's gone to cardboard boxes.
Yeah, I mean, you want to put it in an old cardboard box that
Recycle the cardboard.
Amen.
Okay, other questions? If not, thank you, Grant, for the presentation, important subject, needs a lot of attention going forward. All right, we're approaching our limit of time. I'd like to go to the future agenda items, which was a page on the agenda that you got. What would you like to hear about? Anything in particular you'd like to focus your term next month?
Housing Authority.
The Housing Authority?
The new director, why don't we?
Yes, we do, yes. That could be one. Anything else? Say anything about it?
I'd kind of like to get an update on Ladies Island. I have no idea what's going on. I'd really like to get a little bit of an update on that.
Is that okay?
It's pretty much ripped, depending on the transportation. Much of it's dependent upon the transportation penny.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't know where that is either.
Is there any new information on the transportation penny that
Maybe
can be
that would
discussed?
be marketing for transportation penny.
There's no county council over here, so I don't know the answer.
Advocacy is not a verb. Sorry.
I know they've been getting updates. I think there was an update to the city recently.
Yeah, we had a really good presentation from Jared just this past Tuesday at our work session, so. I don't know if there's anything new, any new information he has to impart. It would be a good time to do it as we get closer to the election.
Yeah, it's the last one we're gonna have opportunity before the election. So,
And at that meeting, the thing that stuck out to me, and I think it is a good persuasive argument, is the number, the public safety part of it, not building more roads, making safer roads, because you had 43,000 people or accidents since 2017 and 400 people killed. That kind of shocks some people when you think about it. And if you do the overlay map and you look, you go, oh my gosh, there's all these, call them crash sites, but we got them all over the place.
okay. All right, transportation referendum, the latest where we're at. I know there's an effort to get underway with a consumer promotion.
Yeah, I think some of the changes are working on that.
It's real strong in the southern part of the county, I don't know. You know, Dean Moss was involved in creating some attention here north of the Broad, but I don't know where that stands.
I think Megan Morris is organizing a meeting to discuss that. It's coming up soon, I can't remember the date.
All right, we'll have a update, and then on the Housing Authority, new director, Housing Authority for the staff. And if maybe we can just get kind of a composite idea of what's going on with the Ladies Island Master Plan and the work that you're handing off. Will you present to me? We can make a little presentation on that.
Okay.
Okay, so are there any other comments, questions, any comments that you would like to make in closing?
Have a safe Labor Day.
Okay, then, without nothing further, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know how to.